Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 12, 13, and 14, Ephraim route of Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm sorry that it's been a little bit since the last episode. I have been kind of busy. Last weekend I was at PAX East, which is a gaming convention in Boston. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed myself there, saw some friends, had some good times. If you ever go to PAX East, if you have any listeners who live in that area and go to PAX East, let me know. I'd love to meet some of you guys. But that's a time for I think for next year. I think the next one's going to be in March. This one was in May. It was in March for like multiple years in a row, and then they switched to May, and then now next year it's going to be back in March. I have no idea what that's about, but okay. Ephraim route today. We're finishing up Ephraim route. That's exciting, and I'm very excited to get into some of these chapters. I really enjoyed these chapters, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. But before I can, let's go ahead and talk about the question from last episode, which was, who is your favorite of Grotto's 6 generals? Calic, Valter, Reeve, Glenn, Dussel, and Selena. And I got 3 responses. 2 of them were from Blue Sky. At OCD Bear says, it is Glenn for me. While I also like Dussel, Glenn edges out the win for being the most outspoken in all of the Grotto cutscenes. I particularly love his disdain for Valter. Shame we never get a playable Glenn. Well, I have good news for you. For the low price of playing the fucking Lagda Ruins like 8 times after you beat the game. I don't know if that's actually... I don't know where you unlock Glenn. I'm pretty sure all of them are playable. Hold on. I'm going to check that, actually. This is something we're going to talk about more in the later episodes, where we actually talk about the Tower of Volney and the Lagda Ruins, like their maps. Yeah, so after you finish the creature campaign, you just need to go through the Lagda Ruins up to the 5th floor, and then once you do that, Glenn will be playable. So it's not exactly the same. I know what you mean, but it is, if you're looking for some extra Glenn content. I do think, okay, so I was a little bit mean. In my actual question, I said it's probably not Glenn, because, I mean, I don't have much of an opinion on Glenn. I don't think he's a particularly great character. But on the other hand, I do get where OCD Bear is coming from, right? Because he is... I would agree. It never really occurred to me, but I think you're right that he is the most outspoken in these cutscenes. Dussel obviously is the only one that like fully defects from the Grotto army. But for most of the cutscenes, until we get to like Ephraim route stuff, he like Dussel just doesn't really say anything. He's kind of more like Selena, where he's just like, yeah, I don't like this, but we're gonna go along with it anyway. So yeah, and his dynamic with Valter is pretty fun. So I'll definitely give you that. Okay, at Rock Me Amadeus, aka Drano, says, I like Valter. He might be the FE series' best weirdo sadist archetype villain. And that's valid. I also really like Valter. Saying that he is the best weirdo sadist archetype villain is very funny. Just because like the fact that there's enough of them to be considered an archetype with like actual competition in it is hilarious. Because there are quite a few of them. I also really like Valter. I still have to give this some thought. I haven't fully decided my answer to this one yet, but I will I'll think it over as I read through the next response, which is actually the first ever response that I've gotten to any of these questions via Spotify comment. I actually forgot that this was a thing that you could do. I think I've said a couple times like, oh yeah, leave a comment or whatever. But I haven't really like thought that through. I wasn't even sure if you could even leave comments on Spotify. But you can, and one person did, and I'm going to read their response right now. So this is from somebody named Solaris, who says, Calic, I love Valter, but he's comically evil, while Calic has more realistic motives and character with some world-building ties. Selena is bittersweet, but she doesn't get the same level of development as some of the other generals, so she doesn't hit as hard as she could. No appreciation for Glenn or Dussel, and Reeve is the most forgettable general, even with the amount of times you have to boss kill him. And then they included this person actually commented. They have a little bit more at the end of this comment, and has also commented on another episode. So this is a good opportunity to remind you guys that I don't always, if you've ever sent me an email that wasn't like a response to one of the questions, or if you going forward in the future, if you leave comments on Spotify, I do read them. I might not always specifically call them out, but I do read every single email, every single comment that I get. And I appreciate them all. So thank you so much for the people who go out of their way to do that. It's really really heartening to see. Okay, so yeah, that's the three answers that I got. We got actually some good variety there. I think all three of those were different answers. We got a Calic, we got a Volter, and we got a Glenn. In terms of my opinion, this is tough for me. I guess, I'll start with who it isn't for sure. It's definitely not Reeve. I think most people will agree that Reeve is like at least one of the, if not the most boring one out of them. I do think it's somewhat interesting that he is the only one of the generals, even the three evil generals, who is like fully in on the plan, at least as far as we know. Like with all the Demon King shit and all that. But that's not like anything about his character, that's just like kind of a fact about the story that I find interesting. That's not something about like Reeve's character that is memorable or noteworthy. So it's definitely not Reeve. Glenn and Selena, it's definitely not either of them either. I don't know which of the two I prefer. We're going to talk about Selena a lot in this episode. And I have like mixed feelings about how they handled her arc. But I think I probably like Selena more than Glenn. Like, is it better to be interesting but poorly written than just kind of like whatever? Because that's kind of how I feel about Glenn. Again, no disrespect to OCD Bear there who said Glenn, but I just like he's just not doing it for me personally. But like Selena is also like Selena I actively dislike in some ways, so I don't know. It could go either way for me on them. Point is, it's not either of them. I think it's definitely between Dusel, Calic, and Volter, for sure. And I haven't done Dusel's SSS episode yet, so I'm not 100% sure. Like, there's still Dusel writing content that I have not seen. Obviously, Dusel is like hugely advantaged in this comparison because he by like miles and miles has the most writing content in the game because he is a playable character with supports. So that almost feels like cheating, right, if we're taking his supports into account. But even just based on main story dialogue, in fact, I guess this is a good time for me to settle this in my own mind, because I've read his supports in the past, but I barely remember any of them. So just based on main story content, I guess this is a good opportunity for me to figure out which one I like the most. And I think it's still Dusel. I really like his relationship with Ephraim. I really like his dynamic with the other generals. I like that he is, sort of like a father figure to the other generals, right? Because we hear a lot about, Volter and Glenn joined at the same time, and then Selena joined later, and obviously Calic and Reeve are like new additions, but Dusel has always been there. Like, as far as we know, as far as has been told to us, Dusel is far and away the longest serving general of Grotto, and the fact that he, after so long being in service to Grotto, he decides that he's going to turn coat, right? That's just so interesting to me, especially with some of the context from his recruitment conversation, where he basically is just like, yeah, I'd rather die than live branded as a traitor, and Ephraim has to basically convince him, like, hey, there's no use in wasting your life like that. I don't know. It's just a really cool character dynamic and a character concept that I appreciate a lot. And I think he had the balls to do what Selena did not do. So I'm just saying, I think he's kind of based. So yeah, I think I got to give it to Dusel here. I like Calic and Volter a lot. I think they're very fun villains. I guess since I'm ranking them all, I might as well decide who I like more between Calic and Volter. I think probably Volter. I think that his introduction at the beginning of the game goes a long way to making the intro of Sacred Stone so memorable in the cutscene with Seth, because I think it establishes it simultaneously makes Walter seem more badass and also makes Seth seem more badass, because you see Seth get fucked up by this guy, and you're like, oh, this is, the Jagan, this guy's really strong, and so that's really well, okay. So you see Seth get hit by Walter, and there's a lot of dialogue about, like, oh, Seth survived an encounter with Walter, he's this super badass guy. And then you play with Seth in gameplay, and he's like the coolest, strongest guy ever. And you're like, damn, the fact that Walter could fuck this guy up so bad means that Walter must also be the coolest, strongest guy ever. Maybe even cooler and or stronger than Seth. And like, that's the fact that that moment props both of them up so well is like so interesting to me. And I think that's really cool. So yeah, I think Reeve, either Glenn or Selena. I still haven't made up my mind about that. Maybe I will by the end of this episode. Then Calic, then Walter, then Dussel. I think that's my ranking. Okay, well, thanks for everybody who wrote in for that one. And this time, this is a really easy question for you guys. Well, really easy for me to come up with, I mean. Maybe it'll be difficult for you to pick. Which do you prefer between Erica route and Ephraim route? We're doing our usual route split thing for, I guess, the last time in this entire podcast. Unless I get to the end of Fates and then, like, what is your favorite Fates game? I guess I could ask that. Or, like, what's your favorite house in 3 houses? I don't, that's interesting. And maybe I could do something with that. But this is the last major route split in the series, I think. Unless I'm really forgetting about something. But yeah, no, I think other than, again, Fates and 3 houses, which are kind of doing their own things. So yeah, which do you prefer, Erica route or Ephraim route? And I'll definitely have my own opinions. I think I've probably already made my opinion on this pretty clear, and if not, you'll probably get the impression from these chapters also. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. So let me know at I'm a Melee Kirby on Twitter or Blue Sky. Email turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com, or now I can say this explicitly, leave a Spotify comment if that's more your speed. Whatever you want to do. All right, that's all that I had for preamble, so let's go ahead and get into our chapters for the episode, starting with Chapter 12, Ephraim, Landing at Tyzel. So, like happened a couple times in Erica route, and I think there's been a couple chapters like this over the course of the game up to this point. We don't get access to the world map between the end of last chapter and the beginning of this one, which makes sense. What are we gonna do? Like, turn the ship around? So yeah, we're going straight into chapter 12. So if your weapons were a little bit damaged, or maybe you didn't buy enough healing items in chapter before chapter 11. You might be a little bit screwed over. For this chapter. I'm not saying that as a criticism. I mean, this has been the standard of Fire Emblem up to this point, other than, I guess, Gaiden. So this isn't, you should expect to have to keep your supplies up to date. Unless, I guess, this is your first Fire Emblem game like it was for me. I don't remember having any particularly bad experiences with not being able to revisit the world map between chapters, mostly just because the game is so easy. But I could see that, like, blindsiding somebody and causing issues. The conflict of this map is pretty straightforward. Basically, Ephraim has just landed at the port that he wanted to get to, and the Grotto soldiers are there waiting for him. Fairly simple. We do hear a little bit, I think this is either before the map starts or very shortly into the map, we hear about a situation with Marissa, who is a recruitable character. Similarly to what happened in Erica route, there was some sort of mix-up. In Erica route, I find it really interesting, like, I'm trying to think about how to word this. So in Erica route, in I believe chapter 10, Marissa was an enemy unit that you could recruit by talking to her with Garrick, because she and Garrick are from the same mercenary company, and Garrick is like, hey, they accidentally put us on different sides That happens, it's a little bit of a screw up sometimes. But your job right now is to fight against me. And Marissa says, no, I don't want to fight against you. So they end up teaming up. Marissa defects over to your side. It's funny how it's always, they defect to your side. Like, what if Marissa could be like, hey, Garrick, I don't want to fight against you. And Garrick's all right, well, we're switching sides. Another win for Tellius is all I'm going to say about that one, but we'll get there when we get there. Anyway, in Erica route, all they could really do was speculate on the fact that the guild made a mistake. They weren't actually 100% sure. But in this route, and considering this is chapter 12, this is probably like chronologically a fair bit later than chapter 10 of Erica route. Ewan shows up and says, hey, I have to go find Marissa. He's talking to like Tethys or somebody, I think. He's like, I have to go find Marissa because actually, I think he's just talking to himself. He says, I have to go find Marissa because I found out that the guild messed up. So they were able to like determine that there was a mistake made before it made any practical difference. And Ewan's on her way to go tell her that. So it's interesting for me to see, and this is something that comes up next chapter as well, like stuff, Erica route and Ephraim route obviously cannot literally happen at the same time, right? Like the events of Erica route, cannot be occurring simultaneously because characters like Garrick decide to stay with Erica the whole time rather than switching sides over to Ephraim route like they do in Ephraim route. It has to, for the most part, other than a couple of minor characters here and there, or a couple of rare exceptions, all of the characters from Erica route need to end up also on Ephraim route. So they cannot literally be the same events happening at the exact same time. But it is interesting to see the continuity that is there sometimes, because we see that like a little bit earlier in the chronology, we see that Marissa, they're like, oh, maybe the guild made a mistake. And then on Ephraim route, where Marissa doesn't show up until later, they have the time to like catch that mistake and know about it before they encounter Marissa on the battlefield. And you can see something similar. I'm just going to get this out of the way now. Garrick and Tethys join next chapter for Ephraim route. And I think what's the implication is that like they're with Inez, like we see in chapter 10 of Erica route. They're with Inez, and Erica goes and saves them, and they have that whole thing that's going on as we see it in Erica route. But then, for whatever reason, Inez decides to afterwards send them to Ephraim, which he does not do on Erica route. So it's interesting to see, like, obviously what the differences are between the two routes in terms of what happens and who appears where. But it's also interesting to see, like, what still does happen on both routes. The guild still makes a mistake. Inez and Garrick and Tethys are all trapped together no matter what route you're on. And it's only later that the divergence happens. I don't know. I find it kind of cool to see those similarities between the two routes on replays. So the actual goal of this map, I'm pretty sure this is a kill boss map, but it's one of those kill boss maps where on the way to the boss, you're just going to end up killing most of the enemies anyway. So it's like kind of basically a route map, or like close to a route map, at least in my experience. Maybe if you're going out of your way to try to beat the map quickly, then it's, you could definitely do so. But like in practical terms, you're probably going to split your army up. You're going to have one take the west side of town, one take the east side of town, and, do whatever you're going to do. And then they meet up and tackle the boss together. I do like this map. I think the layout is cool. It's like part boat map and then part city map, two of the most interesting and well-designed, I guess, flavors of map in the series, because a lot of people really like city maps. A lot of people really like boat maps. At least I personally really like boat maps. So it's interesting to see them combine like this, because it's not just your boat that you're on. You can hole up and like defend, the choke points for a little while. There's a couple gargoyles that come in that can fly past your choke points, but that's pretty minor. There's not a whole lot of flyers. But then there's also another ship over to the east, which has enemies coming out of it that you can go and to take the offensive to them, or you can hole up on that ship if you feel like you're overextending, and you can fall back and use that as as a defensive area. And then you break into the town. There's some villages that you can get. There's an arena if you want to visit the arena for some fucking reason. There's some pretty tough like enemy reinforcements. There's some promoted enemies. It's pretty cool. I like this map. It's not as good as chapter 10 for sure. I think I might even like Phantom shit more than this one, but I think this is a really, really solid map overall. I'm a pretty big fan. The biggest issue that I have with this map, and this is something that becomes more obvious as it goes on, is that there is not really any sort of anti-turtling incentive here. And this has like been kind of a trend for a lot of maps in this game, and also 7 and also 6. This is something that I have been thinking a lot about, especially in preparation for the Tellius games, which pretty drastically, introduce a new system that I'm a big fan of, called bonus experience, which we're not going to talk about extensively here. Obviously, we're going to save that for when we get to the Tellius games. But the thing you got to know about bonus experience right now, if you're not familiar for whatever reason, if you haven't actually played the Tellius games, is that it essentially builds in an anti-turtling incentive into every single map, all of them, and as well as other like side objectives and bonus experience requirements, and that's pretty cool. Again, in more depth, we'll talk about that in FE9 and FE10. But what strikes me about that is how they so clearly recognized a flaw with the previous games, which is that, a lot of maps in other games do have anti-turtling incentives, right? You have, the classic chests that are going to get looted by thieves, or villages that are going to get destroyed by bandits. There's recruitable characters, like just the last episode we had chapter 10, where there was an anti-turtling incentive because you needed to make it to do so before he died. Or maybe there's green units you have to keep alive, like again chapter 10. Maybe there's reinforcements that come from your starting position that you want to get away from quickly, again like chapter 10. I'm starting to realize why chapter 10 might be my favorite chapter in the game. So it's not like they never do this stuff. Some chapters are really good about it, but then you also have some chapters where it's just not like you there's no reason to go fast in chapter 12. You can turtle, you can take all the time in the world that you need. By the end of it, I was kind of slowly making my way up and getting rid of like all of the enemies slowly but surely to make room for, first of all, because I needed to recruit Marissa. And that, that can be a little annoying because she'll either kill herself on you, or, maybe if you try to approach her with a weaker unit, she can probably just kill them with an unlucky Wodow crit. And then taking on the boss was just such a plain affair. So it's a shame to see when a good map like this one is dragged down by the fact that it's so easy to turtle. And I mean, this is one of the things that I've really enjoyed about playing without save states for this series, for this podcast, is that normally the anti-turtling incentive is that it's really boring to go slow, right? Like when I'm playing, FE7 or FE6 or when any of the games that I can play on emulator, and if I'm playing them just like casually, right, I'm save stating fairly frequently, so then I don't have to worry about it. Like I can go as fast as I want. I can do whatever I want. And the worst case scenario is I maybe get sent back a few turns because I hadn't save stated in a little while. In an absolute worst case scenario, I have to reset the map, but like that's pretty rare because usually I'll save state before doing like particularly risky moves. So I'm allowed to have my cake and eat it too, right? Like I can have the fun of going fast without the potential risk of having to redo an entire map. And for this podcast, because I haven't been using save states, it's been causing me to play a lot more cautiously. Thracia was a great example of this. I was going really slow. I was baiting out ballista bolts. I was doing things the really slow, boring way, because what's worse than doing a chapter really slowly and boringly? It's having to do the same map like 3, 4, or 5 times because I keep making dumb mistakes and having to reset because I overextended, or I got unlucky, or I just made a mistake, like the mistakes happen. So it's been causing me to play in a really risk-averse way, which on the one hand is my own decision. Like, I'm choosing to play in the more boring way possible. But it's also really allowed me to sit down and think, like, in terms of the game design, what is the game doing to encourage you to play more risky, you know? And the answer, quite frankly, is that they just don't a lot of the time. And this is this is an example of one of those chapters where you were just not incentivized to play quickly. The more realistic issue in a lot of maps is that there will be an anti-turtling incentive, but once you get rid of it, you know, it'll be like a few turns, maybe like halfway into the map, where you'll like kill the bandit or the thief, or you'll loot all the treasure. And then, you know, even if there was at the beginning of the map an incentive to go quickly, there isn't anymore. That's something that I run into an issue with next chapter, is that there's some bandits attacking villages, but you know, once you get rid of them, and you know, the approach towards Selena is really boring and easy. Anyway, you know, I don't want to spend like too long on this, because this is a pretty basic concept that most Fire Emblem fans are familiar with. But I think it's striking to me how different it is to like think about it and analyze maps like conceptually, as opposed to actually playing them without save states, wanting to play them in the more risk-averse method, and actually feeling the effects of a lack of anti-turtling incentives on how I engage with the game. I think those are two very different experiences, and I was really thinking about it with this one, because the last stretch of this map is honestly kind of boring, and I didn't care for it too much. But overall, I think the map is still pretty good. I mostly just kind of like went through all the gameplay things there that I wanted to talk about. There were a couple story beats that I skipped over that I wanted to address quickly. First of all, Calic has, I guess you could call it a speech. Just kind of, he like gets the troops all rallied up. And it's pretty good. I don't think that this is an aspect of his character that is like ever, like nothing is ever done with it, but I think this gives me the vibe of like someone who's really good at speaking to the troops and getting them to engage with him. And I think a big part of that is his vibe of like, you know, being the down to earth mercenary type, you know, like he's very relatable. He's very you know, brutal and you know, a terrible person, obviously, but he has like ambitions that are very relatable and very easy to understand, which seems like it would make him more personable to the average soldier. And I think that level of charisma, and particularly, you know, the ability to inspire loyalty in his troops, I think is something that they really could have expanded on and made a more like core aspect of his character. Unfortunately, this is the only time that anything like this is ever really implied. But I did get the vibe here that he was like he like his guys like him, his guys respect him. None of the Grotto soldiers have any dialogue here. But I don't know, just the way he's talking to them makes me feel like he's got a good relationship with his men. Probably much more notably, though, something happens a few turns into the map where Reeve shows up, and Reeve's like, hey, we gotta go to Johanna. There's shit going down in Johanna right now, and I've brought some additional reinforcements to help you out in this battle, and monsters show up. And the reason that this is notable is that outside of a couple rare examples, I think the only one that comes to mind is in chapter 6, where basically the dark mage threw some guys in the mountains and just let a spider come for them, which doesn't really imply the same thing as what is going on here. This is the first time that we're seeing Grotto soldiers and monsters fighting together side by side. I think it might actually be the only time that this happens. I'm trying to maybe like I think like chapter 17. I think River of Regret has something similar going on, but it's very rare that this happens again, other than the occasional you know, monsters just like kind of there. It's usually either all Grotto soldiers or all monsters. So there's no in between. And Ephraim brings specific attention to this. He's like, why are these monsters here? And why are they working with Grotto? Like, they're not attacking the Grotto troops. They're working in conjunction with them. So, in case we needed any more evidence that not all is well in the state of Grotto, this is ample evidence, I think. And I thought it was pretty interesting. I have written in my notes here that Dusel is a beast. And that's just because Dusel's so fucking strong. I think I might have downplayed a little bit how strong he is when I went over him. Like, I said he was really good and that he was very easy to take into the late game without issue. I think that he, even like, I don't think you have to put much effort into making him a late game monster. I think he's just like good for the entire rest of the game, which is I kind of implied that you might need a little bit of investment on him to make him a good late game unit. And I don't think that's true. I think like literally just like his base stats and Garm, just like I think he's a powerhouse for the entire remainder of the game. It's kind of insane how good he is. I still I still think Sala might be better but like Warp isn't that, like, you don't need Sala for Warp. Like, you're probably gonna have Mulder, you're gonna have, as a backup you have Natasha or Archer. So Sala's not gonna be like your main warper. I don't know. Dusel's probably better than Sala. I think I might have to revise what I said in the last episode. I think Dusel's probably just better than Sala. I do still really like Sala. I just think Sala is really good. But Dusel is just like, he takes so little damage. He does so much damage. He doesn't double all the time, but he does double a lot of stuff just because enemies are so slow. And when he does, he almost always one rounds. It's crazy. And he's triple A rank and everything. God, he's insane. So this chapter ends, and Seth and Ephraim are talking strategy about what to do next. I don't even remember exactly what they're saying, but it's not super important. Basically, they're just trying to figure out their next steps. But Myrrh goes up to Ephraim and tries to get his attention. It seems like there's something that she wants to tell him. I think she specifically mentions that there's something going on to the east. But Ephraim is like really distracted. He's not like, he's like, give me a second. I'm not even sure if he says anything to her actually. He's too invested in this conversation with Seth to pay her any mind. And so Myrrh decides to just kind of like wander off. I don't remember. She like gives an explanation for why she does this later. I don't remember it being particularly convincing, I guess, of like why she would make such a clearly like irrational decision. She really what this boils down to, I'm pretty sure that what she's sensing is her Dragonstone, and she wants to go get her Dragonstone, and I think that she maybe decides that she doesn't want Ephraim to like, she doesn't want to be a burden on Ephraim anymore. I'm pretty sure that's what she ends up saying to him later, but she disappears. She wanders off, and Ephraim and Seth are like, Ephraim wants to go after her when he realizes that she is gone. Seth seems to be against that idea, and they have a little bit of an argument where, because this is something that's come up a couple times now, is that Seth is really trying to hammer home to Ephraim, like, your life is not only yours anymore. You need to make the call that is the best, the most logically sound, not the one that comes from your emotions. And what Ephraim says to him here, when Seth starts to put up a little bit of resistance about this, he says, I am not ready to divorce myself from compassion just yet, or something to that effect, because he's not the king yet. And I know that he's like, I know that I need to, do what's best for my people, but like, I also need to live by the ideals that I value. So he orders that they're going to go after Myrrh, and Seth doesn't really put up a fight about it. I think Seth kind of has, backs off here. And I don't think this becomes an issue again for the rest of the game. I think this is probably the worst that it ever gets. So anyway, that's where the chapter ends. And we do get access to the world map. I don't think I did anything on the world map this time around. So we can go ahead and go straight into chapter 13 Ephraim Route, which is called Fluorspara's Oath. So, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this. This happened sometime last episode. Leon asked Selena to go get a Dragonstone for him. Told her where she could find it and sent her on her way. And Selena has now gotten her hands on it. And Mur shows up and basically just politely asks for it back, which is very nice of her. But unfortunately, it's very nice of her, but it doesn't really seem to work out too well. She basically, Selena just ignores her and demands to know like who she is, where she comes from. Mur, for some reason, tells her that she's with Prince Ephraim, and then Selena says like, "Oh, I should take you back to the castle with me." And Mur's like, "Oh, you're from Grotto? Like, what the fuck do you mean? You're in the middle of Grotto. You're like in the fucking geographical center of Grotto, practically. What do you mean? Are you from Grotto?" Like, but then thankfully, Mur starts talking about like, have you noticed anybody start acting really weird around you lately? It's possible that this dark force is corrupting them, and she and Selena talk about that for a little bit. She gives some backstory on why she cares so much about some cool stuff that the Emperor did for them, and how she really values basically the Emperor cut her village a break when they couldn't pay taxes. He sent them food and supplies to make sure that they were well taken care of, and she really appreciated him for that and wanted to be in his service. It's implied here that she maybe also has some romantic feelings for him, which is the downfall of all Camus archetypes. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's I guess it goes both ways, right? Because you have like the actual Camus, who loved Nina, but in spite of that, still stood against her. But then you have also characters like Reinhardt and now Selena, who stand against you and do the wrong thing because they love someone in particular, rather than like purely loyalty for their nation. There also seems to be some like romantic feelings in there as well. I have a comment that I want to make about this, and honestly, like a broader conversation that I want to talk about. But for now, let's just get to the end of this cutscene. So, Selena, after giving her whole backstory, basically, she lets Mur go and says, I'll let you go back to Ephraim, but I cannot give you your Dragonstone. Ephraim is now here, and so Selena's preparing to fight him. And she says, like, I have vowed never to fail again in my service to His Majesty, or whatever it is. And so she decides that she's going to fight. And I mean, like, I don't think, this is a fine enough backstory. I think that the biggest thing that people have against Selena, I think, is, I mean, she cares more about the Emperor than she does about, like, protecting people and doing the right thing. And that's like a character flaw. I'm not going to pretend that she's, like, a good person, or that she has, really, really cool values that I really like. But I think it's an interesting flaw for a character to have, like complete devout loyalty to one person over doing what you know to be right. The issue that a lot of people bring up for Selena specifically is that she learns from Mur in this moment that for all intents and purposes the Emperor is dead. And a lot of people say, oh, well, now that she knows that, Vigard is not alive anymore, practically, or, he's not the same person that he used to be, why does she still fight you? And I think there's a couple reasons that you can justify for it. Like, first of all, she finds all this out and then immediately has to make a call before she has time to, like, process any of this. It's entirely possible, I would argue maybe even likely, that if she goes back to Grotto and like has time to think this over, like Grotto Castle, and she has time to think this over, weighing like, oh, this is the person that I'm loyal to, but like it's not the same person anymore. What would he have wanted me to do if the real Vigard was here? Like that sort of thing. If she had time to think all of that through, she might have made a different decision. I don't know for sure, but I think it's very possible. But that's not what happens. Instead, that she has to make this decision right here in this moment. And I think it's maybe asking and expecting a little bit too much of her to, on the basis of something she was told by a complete stranger 5 minutes ago, to become a traitor and go against everything that she has ever like staked her life on. So from that perspective, I don't think that's that weird. So I think overall I come down on Selena being a fine character. I don't hate her, but I don't particularly like her either. That's about where I land on things. I think she's better than Reinhardt. I think she's better than Reinhardt, in my opinion, but your mileage may vary. Maybe some people disagree. Anyway, I want to talk about something that's been bugging me, and I've never really had strong words to articulate it. I'm going to try my best. I might still have trouble articulating what I'm about to talk about, but it's just something that keeps coming up that I think it just feels so weird. And that is the truly bizarre world building that this game has. There are 5 countries on this continent. There's Grotto, Rene, Frelia, Magvel is the name of the continent, but there's also Johanna and Rouston. It's been established a lot that Grotto and Rene used to be really, really, really close with each other. Rene and Frelia are still really, really close with each other. Doesn't seem like Frelia and Grotto are particularly close. But just like by extension, they were all probably allies with each other. And we don't really know where Rouston and Johanna fit into all this, but we certainly never hear anything about like the countries fighting with each other, or like the kings and queens like failing to get along, or anything like that. It seems like, for the most part, since the time of the Demon King, they all just kind of were chill with each other. And that's fine. That makes sense. I don't have an issue with that. The problem is that it's not consistent with some other stuff that we see and hear about over the course of the game. It's mostly come up in supports, which is part of the reason I haven't really talked about it much yet, because I don't really like to go into stuff this in-depth in support episodes. And also because, there's no telling, like, maybe the supports were written by a different team, or, like, different people within the same team, or maybe they just, like, aren't always 100%, like, cross-referencing between the story and the supports to make sure that everything lines up. That's like, super fine. But this is the first time that I can think of that it's come up in the main story, and I want to finally talk about it. In Selena's backstory, when Selena's talking about what the Emperor did, she says, yeah, he sent supplies to my village who were so poor that we couldn't even afford to pay taxes. He went out of his way to help us and to save us. And then she says, neighboring kingdoms must have thought the Emperor mad, I can only guess. But His Majesty did not care about his standing among kings. He cared for his people. He saved us. And the implication of this is that the other countries would not have done this. Like, are you telling me that Fado would not have done this for a town in Rene? Are you telling me that Hayden would not do this for a town in Frelia? Because that's not very consistent with what we've seen from them as characters up to this point. Everything that we've heard about both Frelia and Rene talk about how awesome they are. Like the Hayden is like this hero who like comes in and helps out Erica and Ephraim when they need help. People apparently really liked Fado before everything went down. He seemed like he was a good guy. So I don't know if the implication of this is supposed to be that they were not like as magnanimous as, or as generous as maybe the story might have led you to believe. I guess maybe Selena is wrong here. I don't know what it could be, but this is just like, if this was a one-off thing, it wouldn't really matter. But there's also stuff like, why does Frelia have like a border guard? Like, if in a you got to think about this, right? Like, in a society where all 5 of these kingdoms have had no major or maybe even minor conflicts for like years and years and years, like, what purpose is there in having like dedicated border fortresses and border guards? Why does it seem like they're all like well versed in the way of war? Like, this is a society that hasn't had a proper war in like centuries, it seems like, and yet it keeps coming up, like, oh, we're soldiers, we fight alongside each other and crush our enemies. It's like, what enemies? Like, who could they possibly be talking about? I'm trying to think of other specific examples, and nothing's really coming to mind. It's like, I think like the like stuff with Gilliam and maybe like Franz and Mulder and all them. Like, I feel like there's some implications in some of those supports. But I don't know, man. It's always felt really weird to me, like, as I've been going through this replay. I haven't really thought about it much prior to this, but on this replay, it keeps popping into my mind. It's really bugging me. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? I don't know. We'll see if it keeps going. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or ideas about some of this stuff. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me that other people see what I see, or maybe I'm just thinking too much into it. I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant over. We can actually progress further into the chapter now. The chapter begins with Ephraim, wants to get Myrrh, and he realizes that Selena is like gonna fight him, so they have to fight. Myrrh shows back up and says, "Hey, don't try not to kill Selena if you can avoid it," which kind of points to her being recruitable. But there is no way for you to recruit Selena or for you to end the map without killing her. It's a route map, so you have to kill her. The map is laid out pretty interestingly. It's kind of like a big circle. With different layers and rivers like blocking your way further into the circle, and you have to like cross bridges to get there and stuff. It's pretty compact overall. In fact, you could probably reach Selena on like turn 2 if you really wanted to, maybe even turn 1, with a flyer and kill her. Of course, the dangerous part of that is, who are you going to do that with that's going to be safe to leave there in the center for, however many turns it takes for you to get them out. Approaching Selena willy-nilly can also be an issue because she has a bolting tome, which can be very obnoxious, especially since, as I said, she's kind of positioned in the center of the map. So if you want to progress further into the center to get like further in, fight some enemies, save some villages, then you're going to be in range of her bolting tome. So she can do a lot of damage with that. It's pretty scary. There is an anti-turtling incentive here in the form of bandits that will come and try to destroy the villages. I went pretty slow for this map, not like super slow, but pretty slow, and I still managed to save the villages without too much of an issue. I had to bait the guys away. I actually forgot that the bandits came for these villages, so I was kind of being slow, and I did manage to save them. I had to because the bandits will prioritize attacking you over going to the village. So if you take advantage of that fact, you basically there's no risk of you not saving the villages. I don't think the items that they give you here are particularly good. Let me just double check. Yeah, the villages only give you a barrier staff and a talisman. There is apparently there's some items that you can steal too. You can get a red gem and a speed wing. There is an enemy troubadour that drops an energy ring. You don't have to steal that one. You just need to kill the troubadour and you get it. Which, I think this is a route map, so I think you're always going to kill them. Selena has some really cool dialogue with Ephraim and Dusel. It's not battle dialogue for some reason. The only way you can get this dialogue is if you have them go to Selena's island. I guess because they didn't want it to trigger if she used bolting on them. I guess they wanted you to have to get closer to her in order for this to happen. And they didn't want it to do, you can snipe Dusel from fucking 10 squares away, and she's like, let's settle this with steel, my friend. But the dialogue here is pretty good. I particularly enjoy the Ephraim conversation. Ephraim's like, that what you're doing is wrong. The Emperor is insane and out of his mind. Is this really, what loyalty means for you? To me, this dialogue reads more like, not that Selena is genuinely, truly, wants to help the Emperor at this point, but more just she doesn't know what else she's supposed to do. She doesn't see any other path for herself that's viable. I did forget to mention that Garrick, I mentioned it last chapter, I guess, but I forgot to re-mention it. Garrick and Tethys do join you in this map. I don't have much to say about them, or Ewan or Marissa for that matter. They're all here. You recruit them through various means, and some of them are Marissa's kind of annoying to recruit. But in terms of gameplay, they're all basically the same. I mean, Garrick and Tethys are I guess noticeably worse because they joined so much later. But it's not a huge difference, and Garrick is still one of the best combat units in the game, especially if you promote him instantly. Ewan and Marissa are still terrible. There's nothing new about that. I am still using Ewan. I'm still using Marissa. All that's the same. I was worried. So when I got to the end of the route split, I had to decide, all right, well, am I going to continue from Ephraim route or Erica route? And I want to continue from Ephraim route. As I mentioned a couple times, I prefer the story that plays out if you continue from Ephraim route. But I was like, I mean, I'm gonna look up all the cutscenes anyway and talk about the stories from both perspectives. Um, so I was like, I don't mind. Excuse me. I don't mind switching over to the end of Erica route and continuing from there if I got like better level ups than I did in Ephraim route. But honestly, my Ephraim route level ups were fucking great. Way, maybe not way better, but like I think a fair bit better than what I got on Erica route. So I will be continuing from Ephraim route for sure. Anyway, there's not really much else to say here. I do like this map. I will say that. I like the way that you have to like be creative about crossing the rivers. There's like snags that you can drop down. You can use flyers efficiently, or you can go around if you don't mind taking the long way. There's some pretty tough enemies that you have to be careful of. Selena herself can be very scary with her bolting tome. Once you actually get close to her, she's not too difficult to take out. Yeah, I'm a fan of this. I'm a fan of this map. I don't think any of the maps this chapter miss. I think they're all, or any of the maps this episode miss. I think they're all like pretty great. All right. The end of this chapter is pretty straightforward. Mur is sad that Selena died. Ephraim also seems sad that Selena died. They talk it out a little bit. And Ephraim is going to head towards the capital. We're finally here. We're at the capital of Grotto, which feels a little bit early in the story for this to be happening, especially if you did Erica route first. Then you're like, this probably isn't going to be the end. This isn't going to pan out the way we think it is. But we are here. We finally made it. The next chapter is chapter 14, Ephraim route, called Father and Son. Now, before anything else, you will get access to the world map in this before this chapter. You should make sure you have at least one restore staff, but I would highly recommend that you have a second one. You need them in this chapter really badly, and we'll talk about why. But go and get a restore staff if you haven't before now. I'm pretty sure you get one over the course of the story, but you can buy them in the chapter 5 shop at Seraphu. I'm pretty sure that you already have one no matter what. I guess it's possible. I don't know if you can burn through an entire use of restore by this point in the game, or entire 10 uses of restore. But if you get one over the course of the story, then you should still probably have it. So you're probably fine, but getting a second one will be very helpful, trust me. As Ephraim approaches the castle, there was a line here that I thought was funny, where the narration says that Selena is added to the list of innocents whose lives Vigard must answer for, or something like that. And describing Selena as an innocent is very disingenuous. Like, even if you want to argue that she's not completely awful, or that she's an interesting character or whatever, like, that's all fine. I don't agree necessarily, but I can see that argument. I think it's a valid one. There's no shot that you can argue that she is an innocent in all of this, in this conflict. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's ridiculous. She's done so much bad shit, even knowing that she, that the Emperor is terrible and that he's out of his mind, like, still decided to, like, team up, still decided to go against you and possibly, like, kill members of your army. Like, could you imagine if you got a death in the previous chapter? Like, fucking Garrick dies because she like, boltings him or something, and then he's like, oh, Selena was just an innocent and all this. Like, fuck off. Don't, like, downplay her decision. Like, if you want to make the argument that Selena is an interesting character, then that is probably going to come from, you know, the amount of autonomy that she had, like the fact that she's making this decision, and, you know, like, finding the choice that she makes given the options that she has interesting. But don't downplay the fact that she is making a choice. Like, this is her, it was her decision to go against you. She is not innocent. That's how I feel. So we get an enemy POV at the beginning of this chapter where Leon is talking with his dad. And we get the bombshell dropped here. I thought it wasn't until the end of the chapter, but we find out right away. Leon basically tells us that Vigard is dead. He says, like, oh, when you died, I couldn't, you know, bear it. You know, is this my fault that I end up getting us in this situation? And obviously Vigard doesn't respond, because at this point we're led to believe that Vigard is basically just like a puppet or a zombie of some kind. But we now know explicitly that Vigard is, like, dead. Not just, like, corrupted by darkness, not just, you know, his mind has been taken over. He is dead. And Leon, presumably, is the one controlling him, because nobody else seems to know. We also see that Leon is suffering from his headaches here, similarly to what was going on in Chapter 14 of Erica Route, which I think is going to be relevant to Leon's story moving forward. So just keep that in mind. I'll probably bring this up again in a later episode, is that Leon is having headaches here, and is clearly struggling with something. We don't know exactly what, but he's having a hard time. I fully believe, and this is something that this is hard to argue against, I think, because you would have no reason to pretend when he's by himself like this. I think that Leon in this scene is still fully in control of himself, which implies that he might also be fully in control of himself, or at least partially in control of himself, at a similar point in Erica Route. It'll be interesting to sort of talk about how that plays out over the course of the next few chapters in Ephraim Route and in Erica Route. So the goal here is very simple. It's a seize map. We go to the throne room and we kill Vigard and we seize the throne. Getting there is pretty tricky, and this is a really cool map. It's a castle siege map, so we're split up into two groups, so we can meet up if we want to. There's a treasure room in the middle that you can open and get some items. There's some good items in this chapter. You definitely want to visit as many of the chests as possible. There's a body ring that you can steal off of an archer later too, so you got some good items here. But regardless of whether you decide to keep your army split or have them all together, you're supposed to go up these hallways where you can then open some big doors and then converge in the middle to open the door to the throne room. I always like feeling like I'm storming a well-defended, well-fortified keep. It's a similar feeling to Chapter 19, actually. Or, sorry, not Chapter 19, Chapter 9 of this game in Ephraim Route, where it feels like you are actually penetrating a well-fortified defensive position. They have, generals. I don't know why they have door keys outside the doors. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but whatever. You have, armor knights posted up in front of the doors. You have archers, firing at you from the ramparts. You have, status staves, and I don't think there's any... I think there's long-range magic. At the very least, there's long-range status staves that they can shoot at you from inside their defensive positions. It's cool. I really like this setup of map. Of course, this map is notorious for having not one, not two, but three different enemies, promoted enemies. I think two of them are I think it's three. There's two druids and then a bishop, I think, who all have berserk staves. And then for good measure, I think there's a sleep staff somewhere, and then also a silence staff. There's maybe I'm forgetting. I remember there's a silence staff for sure, and there's obviously a berserk. I don't remember if sleep is anywhere. I think it might actually just be silence and berserk, but either way. Very notorious chapter for its use of status staves. Berserk is one of the most annoying statuses in the entire game, because in the entire series really, because most statuses like silence or sleep, they can be annoying for sure, but usually just slowing down and playing a bit defensively for a few turns is enough to get past them. Or if you have a restore staff, then you can just get over it quickly, but you don't have to. Berserk is a completely different beast, because you now suddenly have to change everything you're doing. You have to make sure that there are no enemies, or that there are no allies within range of the berserked unit, that they're going to want to prioritize attacking over going for the enemies. You don't have any control over them, so if they're taking a lot of damage, you can have them back off and heal. I don't even think you can heal them if you would a physics staff if they're berserked. I'm pretty sure that you just have to hope that they don't die. So it's very, very difficult. I had the two restore staves on me, so I thought I was good to go, and for the most part I was fine. But what happened a lot was that, or not a lot, this happened once, is that I got berserked, and then immediately my restore staff user on that side got silenced, so I couldn't heal the berserk, which is very funny. I think it was actually fucking Ford again. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was somebody else, but Ford got berserked also in Chapter 14 of Erica Route. I don't know if I mentioned that, but he just keeps getting berserked. It's really funny. Sorry, I'm really tired today. Anyway, So I had to like completely just like change my mind about where I was going. I had my right group like go full 180 and go in the other direction until Berserk wore off. Um, and then even on the side where I was able to consistently use Restore to heal off Berserk, what was happening is that I didn't have a lot of other like healing options because I had to have La Rochelle use Restore practically every turn. And so she didn't have the action economy that I needed to like also heal up my units. So it was pretty stressful. I had really low health on a lot of my guys at a couple points in this map. And that was pretty fun. I really like this map. It's like fun and stressful, but in like it's really stressful and anxiety producing, but in like in a really fun way that I enjoyed a lot. There is also a recruitable character. We can once again get Renak. He starts on the top right, and he makes his way to the left to try to escape. Once again, you can either recruit him with Ephraim by paying 10,000 gold like you could with Erica, or if you just talk to him with La Rochelle, you can recruit him for free. And doing so is a little bit harder than it is in Erica route, in my opinion, because you have to make much more of an active effort to get to where he's supposed to be in time to recruit him. In fact, I would recommend having La Rochelle start on the left side, because by the time you get into a position to recruit him, he'll probably have made his way across the horizontal length of the castle at that point. So definitely do that if you ask me. I guess maybe if you're going fast enough, you can just like zip La Rochelle up there, but it's a little tricky. That's the anti-internaling incentive for this map, because if you don't hurry, then you can definitely lose out on Renak. I think there might be some thieves going for chests as well, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, once that's all said and done, it's a pretty straightforward map. It's tough, it's tricky, but what you actually have to do here isn't very complicated. So you make your way up, you recruit Renak, you get whatever chests you want, and then you break into the throne room. There is a very similar moment in FE6 that made me really like stop and laugh and think about this game, because the throne room in chapter 22 of FE6, which is the map where you fight Zephiel, the reinforcements in that throne room are terrifying, because not only are they same tier reinforcements, but they're also really, really strong. So if you break into the throne room and then don't kill Zephiel fast enough, then like those guys can show up and fuck you up, man. It's crazy. But in this, I was getting jumped by reinforcements, but they're not same turn reinforcements, and they aren't particularly strong, so I was able to deal with them no problem. It's just so funny to me that like my reaction to these guys showing up was like, oh hey, whatever, and then ooh, more free experience. But then like I had fucking PTSD flashbacks to FE6, where those guys like literally caused like several resets for me back in the day. Man, that shit's crazy. I think I've said enough times that this game is really easy, so I won't harp on that, but worth mentioning. You kill Vigard, and Vigard's really tough. He has like very slight crit on most of your army, so it's very possible that you could just get crit and die. I fought him with Colm, and it was really funny. He never proc Silencer, but he did crit a couple times, I think, which was good. There is a lot of story content that happens after you beat Vigard and seize the throne. More so than I think on Erica route, to be honest. Leon is here again, and he meets with Ephraim, similarly to how he met with Erica at the end of Erica route. And okay, so I think I've danced around this enough. I haven't like said anything explicit about this until like now, but I've implied it a couple times. I'm going to go ahead and explain the biggest difference between the story after Erica route and the story after Ephraim route, because it's relevant to this cutscene, and I think what they were trying to do with this cutscene, which I think is really interesting. So, Leon, and we find out a little bit of this backstory later on, so I guess I'll speed it up a little bit. Leon is essentially, at this point, sharing his body with the Demon King. They made the stone, the Dark Stone, from Grotto's Sacred Stone, and it had really strong powers, but they were too much for Leon, and the Demon King's soul sort of like took over his body. That's the gist of it, right? And throughout the story, the Demon King is in there, but so is Leon a little bit, and it's we don't get like a clear idea of like who's more in control at any given time, but there are plenty of times where we see Leon acting as Leon, clearly just being Leon, and then we see Leon where like maybe he's also the Demon King a little bit, or maybe he's fully the Demon King, whatever. It's not very clear like what the 50-50 split is on that. It's kind of, it reminds me actually of Lewin and Forseti in FE4 in my opinion, in that way, which is pretty cool. But here's the difference, right? By the time of chapter 14, it's game over. The Demon King has fully taken over Leon's body. There is essentially nothing of Leon left by the time of chapter 14. Those last few moments that we see Leon, like, oh no, Calic, don't kill Ismaer, or, you know, like, him talking to his dad, having, like, that little moment of lucidity at the beginning of this chapter, is effectively the last time that Leon gets to be in control of himself for the rest of the game. Basically. But there is a really key difference here. In Erica Route, that is all true. There's a moment at the end of Erica Route where he's talking to Erica, you know, oh, hey, you know, have faith in me, like, we'll talk later, you know, that sort of thing. He is lying. That is the Demon King. He is fully lying, and he is not actually Leon in any capacity. He is pretending and lying to Erica to kind of gain her trust so that he can use that against her later. In Ephraim Route, he goes full mask off right away. He just says, I'm the Demon King, I'm gonna kill you, you know, like, I'll you know, we'll fight later and I'll kill you, I killed your father, I took over Rene, all that stuff. We find out later, not for a while, but we do find out in, I think, chapter 18, Leon is also lying here, because in chapter 14 of just Ephraim Route, and the way that he explains this later is that it's specifically because Ephraim is the one that he meets with during this cutscene instead of Erica. The fact that he has like such unresolved like anger and jealousy and a rivalry with Ephraim, that pushes him to assert his willpower back over the Demon King and gain control of his own body again. To an extent. There's still definitely a lot of room to argue that the Demon King is influencing his actions, but as far as we know, at least as far as I can remember, at this point in Ephraim Route, when he's talking to Ephraim here, Leon is still lucid, he is still actually the real Leon, and the real Leon continues to be primarily the one in control for the remainder of the game. So that is the difference between Ephraim Route, post Ephraim Route story and post Erica Route story, is that despite the fact that they cover the same key events, they cover the same chapters, and some of the major story beats, Leon is primarily lucid and in control of himself in Ephraim Route, whereas in Erica Route, it is the Demon King that is fully in control. And that, for that reason, that is why I feel so strongly that Ephraim Route is the superior route, not just in terms of its gameplay and its maps, but also the story that comes after Ephraim Route, because, quite frankly, Leon in Erica Route is just not an interesting villain. It's not interesting to me that he fucked around and got... Okay, that's not... Maybe not entirely fair. There's, like, some cool things about Leon that we find out before the route split and during the route split. And it's, you know, he's a lot more of a tragic villain in that sense. But in Ephraim Route, he is, like, legitimately... Like, he is in control of himself for the most part. He's still... But he's still, you know... He is the same Leon that Erica and Ephraim knew, and he is fighting against them, which is so much more interesting to me. You know, a hero or a villain, like, making a choice to do the wrong thing for what they think are the right reasons, or maybe just for personal selfish reasons, but still, you know, still human, right? Like, still in control of themselves, still having autonomy over their own actions, instead of just being corrupted by, like, an ontologically evil demon, you know? That's just so much more boring to me. Whatever. It's not a huge deal. That's not true. It is a huge deal. I don't know why I said that, but Eric Rout's still cool. There's some stuff I like about the stuff in Eric Rout, and we'll talk about that later, but, in the later chapters. The reason that I wanted to bring that up here is because I think it is worth mentioning as a as like a parallel, right? Because in Ephraim Rout, it is the real Leon pretending to be the Demon King, and in Erica Rout, it is the Demon King pretending to be the real Leon. And I just think that's a fun parallel between these two routes that I find super interesting. Leon also has a line here where he says, like father, like son, in reference to him killing both Ephraim and his father, which is funny because it's like a callback to the title of the chapter. But then also, I like the fact that there's like layers to what that to what the title of that chapter means, what the title of this chapter means. I think that's pretty interesting. So after Ephraim's conversation with Leon, they find a prisoner being kept in the dungeons. His name is Noel, and he is a dark mage who has worked in service of Grotto for a while. He used to work with Leon, and he knows everything about what's going on. And so the plan was for him to be executed, but they lost before they could get around to executing him. Essentially what happened, I basically already gave the gist, but they were experimenting on Grotto's Sacred Stone, which is sometimes called the Fire Emblem. Which is that's mentioned earlier in the chapter. This is what the Fire Emblem is in this game, is Grotto's Sacred Stone, essentially. And the thing that's unique about Grotto's Sacred Stone is that all of them were used in the process of sealing away the Demon King, but it is only the Grotto Stone that actually physically has the Demon King's soul inside of it. And so the Grotto, like Dark Mages and Leon, took the stone, and they essentially cut it in half. They had the actual like Sacred Stone part without the Demon King soul in it, which Leon immediately destroyed, probably under the influence of the Demon King. And then they had what would later become known as the Dark Stone, which you've already heard about. That is the stone that contains the Demon King soul and is probably where the Demon King was able to take over Leon. That's the gist of it, really. That's all that Noel knows at this point. And we'll talk about Noel in terms of gameplay when we actually get to use him a little bit more in chapter 15. But for right now, I like Noel character-wise so far. I think he has some fun dialogue. His reaction to seeing Ephraim is to assume that he's an executioner and to say, "Oh, has my execution been moved up on the schedule?" Which is pretty funny. I don't think that like sort of cynical aspect of his character comes through very well in his supports, from what I remember. But I guess we'll see. I'll read more of them later. So anyway, the last thing that happens in this chapter is that Noel takes Ephraim into the chamber where the Sacred Stone used to be kept. And the Sacred Stone is gone. The Sacred Stone's already been destroyed. But the Sacred Twins are still here. The Sacred Twins, we found out about these in chapter 14 of Erica Rout. They are weapons that were used by the ancient heroes and have like effective damage against monsters and all that stuff. The two ones that we get here are the S rank Axe Garm and the S rank Dark Tome. I believe it's called Glepnir. And Glepnir has the distinction of weirdly being the only legendary weapon that is not effective against monsters. I don't get why they did that, but whatever, I guess. So it's definitely the worst one, especially considering there's only 2 characters in the entire game who will be able to use that in any capacity. And they're both bad. It's Ewan if you make him into a shaman, and then, a druid or a sorcerer, or Noel. And both of them are not very good units. So Glepnir is kind of like the laughingstock. Unlike Garm. Garm is the fucking Chad. Giga Chad Garm is an axe, which a lot of characters use axes in this game. A lot of really good characters use axes in this game. And it gives you +5 speed, which is something that a lot of the axe units struggle with in this game. Is that when you have it equipped, it gives you +5 speed. So it doesn't help them like a lot of the time, like all the time. But anytime they're using Garm, they start to double like a lot more stuff, which is really good. And I actually had this thought immediately before Ephraim said it, so I thought it was cool that like he and I were on the same wavelength for this. Leon, when he was possessed by the Demon King, destroyed the Sacred Stone. And yet, for some reason, despite the fact that he had ample time to, he never did anything to the Sacred Twins. He could have destroyed them, he could have hid them, he could have done whatever he wanted to them. But he didn't, which begs the question of why. And we're not really given any sort of like definitive answer or even like any kind of strong implication here. I think the implication we're supposed to take away, especially considering that this scene happens on Ephraim route, is that Leon is still in there somewhere, and he didn't want, he wanted to make things. There's the little piece of Leon that's still in there, wanted to give Ephraim and others a fighting chance as best as possible. So, and that's the end of chapter 14. I really liked all of these chapters. I guess we could just go ahead and get into the map gauntlet. I would say my favorite is almost certainly Father and Son. I think it's stressful and difficult, but I enjoyed it for that reason. But on the other hand, the other two chapters are also pretty good. Father and Son, I don't think beats out chapter 10. I do think it's like fairly close, but I think I like chapter 10 just a little bit more. And yeah, so I'm excited for what the rest of the game brings to the table. Next time we will be doing chapters 15, 16, and 17. I don't know where in that sequence it'll happen, because we could do it at any time. But I'm also going to be doing the Tower of Volney. I'll do the whole thing. We unlock the whole thing after chapter 15. So we could do it right after we unlock it. Maybe I wait until chapter 16 or what. But at some point I will do the whole Tower of Volney and report back. I probably won't go into too much detail about anything there, since I don't remember the maps in that being particularly like good or well designed. But I will, if there's anything noteworthy there, I guess we'll talk about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about mechanically, like how that works, especially like the creature campaign and stuff. But yeah, that's all. So let's go ahead and move on to news. Sacred Stones is coming to the NSO, Nintendo Switch Online, GBA lineup of games. There's a Lucina figure, and that's it. Those are the only things that are new from the last time that I recorded an episode. I do have some things to report about what I've been doing. I finished Victory Gundam. That was pretty cool. I have mixed feelings about it. I can understand why there's such a strong subset of people that do not like Victory Gundam very much. But it is I still thought it was pretty good. I had a good time with it. I can maybe talk more about that at some point, but I'm want to wrap up a little bit quickly because I have other stuff I got to do. But maybe I'll talk more about Gundam in general at some point. I don't know. In terms of after that though, I started watching. So I love Twin Peaks. I think I talked about Twin Peaks at some point on this podcast. I really like the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks. Even the sort of notoriously shitty parts of season 2, I thoroughly enjoyed personally. It was very different tone-wise, but I still thought it was fun. And I love all the characters. I love Dale Cooper. I love Truman. I love Andy and Lucy are great. I like Bobby. So there's some really good people and really good characters and really good moments from that series. The reason I'm bringing it up is because recently, within the past few years, they put out season 3 of Twin Peaks, and it is supposed to be David Lynch's magnum opus, allegedly, according to what I've been hearing. So I have been watching that. I'm only on episode 4, so I still have quite a ways to go, but I'm enjoying it so far. I will say, what maybe the single biggest thing that I liked about Twin Peaks was Dale Cooper as a character, and he's in the new season kind of, but also like the way he's like really weird circumstances around him being in things, and it's kind of complicated. But I will say that I miss the old Dale Cooper. I really wish he was doing more Dale Cooper stuff. But on the other hand, I'm excited to see like what new direction this season takes the story and the characters. I'm excited to see. I do not want them to just repeat all the same things over and over again. That's fine. I get why Lynch didn't want to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and argue it's bad or anything. But I just really like Dale Cooper. I wish I got to see more Dale Cooperisms. Anyway, and then in terms of games, not much has really changed on the game front. I might drop Radiant Historia. I've been thinking about dropping Radiant Historia just because I haven't been having that much fun with it, but I'm still very early, relative to the fact that it's a JRPG. You know, I'm only like 5 or 6 hours in, which is a pretty short amount of time for a JRPG. So I might give it one last push for a few hours before I call it quits completely, but I think I might just be done because I don't care very much for the characters. The combat's like fun, but it's not enough to carry for me. Like it's not really doing it for me, and I don't know what I'm going to play next. But I will keep you guys posted as I do more. Okay, I think that's it. Let me know what you prefer between Erica and Ephraim route. I'm a Melee Kirby on Twitter and Blue Sky, turnwellpodcast@gmail.com, or Spotify comments if you prefer that method. And I think that's everything. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.